doing. They're picking up the change in the noise as a burst of spread goes by.
Right.
What we're doing with the web bots is we're trying to get, we'll take a sample, but we'll only pick up appropriate pieces of that spread spectrum signal sporadically, because we're still working on how the heck do you decode this stuff.
Yeah.
Also bear in mind, theirs comes through a purely mechanical approach in the sense that the devices sit out there, pick it up, and react or don't. What we're doing is much more subtle because we're working with the mind as a filter.
Yours actually might be, I don't know if it's more subtle or if you might argue it's more specific. I'm not really sure yet. But I don't think the people at Princeton have begun to discern yet what these giant spikes mean, whether it's good stuff, bad stuff, where it might be, that sort of thing. It's just something that is coming from, they're measuring that's apparently coming from the collective consciousness. Since you're using words and assigning emotional meaning to those, one could almost argue that yours is more specifically targeted than theirs.
And you would be correct, and the underlying focus of the whole thing is really the fact that Princeton is approaching it from an academic. We don't have to make a profit off of this, whereas we're out here trying to survive by our wits alone, and it's not that easy.
Well, could you have made lots of money using this in the stock market? Because that's how the whole brainchild here began, right?
That was the goal.
So, have either one of you become rich in the market using predictions made with that software yet?
Only because in my own case, I bought gold like crazy at 260.
Oh.
Following the original work.
Based on what you saw as an output, right? Well,
right.
Then at 260, it's over 400 now. Well, gee, you're doing very well. Okay. That was one big question. Now we'll proceed into the heart of what's coming, because they will have predictions for us based on what they know.
Talk with Art Bell. Call the Wildcard line at area code 775-727-1295. The first-time caller line is area code 775-727-1222. To talk with Art Bell from east of the Rockies, call toll-free at 800-825-5033. From west of the Rockies, call 800-618-8255. International callers may reach Art by calling your in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5. And dialing toll-free 800-893-0903. From coast to coast and worldwide on the Internet, This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
It is, and that's exactly where this program belongs, right out on the edge of what's happening. That's barely discernible in the most exciting field that mankind will ever plow a furrow, and that's the human mind. This is exactly where this program ought to be. My guests are George Ure and a gentleman who declines to call himself anything but Clif. Once again, George Ure and Clif, and I think it's very important for the audience to understand again, Clif is not giving his last name simply because of the sensitivity of the programs and the code that he's writing and the fact that he's using it openly on the web, and he is subject to many a web attack, as you might imagine he would be. So for that reason, he's not further identifying himself, and I identify with that problem. Believe me, Clif, I really do. So
I'm sure you do, sir.
Yeah, so you guys did okay with gold. Now, do you realize, I guess by now you have both realized the implications of the program are much bigger than just making a buck, right?
Absolutely. In fact, following the 911 event, when my wife and I got our sailboat down to San Diego, Clif and I responded to a Department of Defense broad area announcement, or BAA, and I consider myself pretty darn good at PowerPoints, but you see how difficult it is to explain what we're doing.
Yes.
And the problem with this broad area announcement was I had to boil everything, including 2 years of budget, down into a single PowerPoint slide.
Wow.
And so, you know, if somebody sent you a PowerPoint slide that said basically, hi, we think we can see the future, we need a couple of $1 million, a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah.
You know,
I clearly see the problems. A lot of bandwidth, you would need a lot of bandwidth.
On the other hand, I just sent you an email so you can actually see the timestamp on it. We have informally passed some of the more recent WebBot outputs to the military.
Oh.
And I forwarded to you a timestamp copy of which was sent back to me at my request by some friends in the military. And I forwarded that to you. Please don't use their name or which unit and so forth. But it documents that we forecast what seemed like, well, appears to have been the Northeast power outage 45 days before it took place. The stamp that you have is July 2 at 1:50 p.m.
Now, what did you, at that time, say was going to happen? You looked at all the information and concluded that there was going to be a power outage?
Well, not exactly. Clif had, in late June, done a scaled-down run of the WebBot looking for the next terrorist attack.
Right.
And so what the WebBot said was the entity is, and I'll read this verbatim, the Wahhabi entity is seen as preparing an attack on a site with aspects of south, with specific references to a place where the wood in the earth grows upward. Nearby will be an energy plant filled with tremendous effort work. The target chosen for the entity has associations with a vertical wall ascent, which is near which is a low land or low-lying area from which there rises power and influence or confluence. This latter may suggest a site where a power plant sits at the base of a cliff or naturally occurring wall.
Uh-huh.
Now, it goes on from there, including some of the more interesting phrases. Further, there are references to an empty city nearby the target, and one of my website readers suggested that sure sounds like an electrical switchyard with rows of transformers, because that looks kind of like an empty city when you think about it.
You know, in the manner that you just described what turned out to be the power outage, I would have expected a very similar output, if you will, from a remote viewer. I mean, in almost the same language, in fact. Not quite, but almost the same language.
Yeah, the difference is they had $100 million or whatever.
Well, I know.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a couple of wingnuts in a garage deal.
But let's not miss Art's point. I also noticed that sort of thing when I first started doing the interpretation, that all of the language seems to, in the process of boiling down to this thick syrupy mass, also seems to condense down to what I call the archetypes.
Yes.
Not the Jungian archetypes, but nonetheless the same sort of archetypes that, you're correct, are presented by remote viewers and other people that are wielding some form of, like, psychic phenomena.
Well, the language of description sounded very similar.
And we also find it in the I Ching, as George noted earlier. It seems to go back. I've also noticed similar things in even older books like the Parables of Zoroaster.
All right, as you have described this process to others, whilst no doubt begging for funds to get the bandwidth to proceed on a larger scale, what kind of response back have you received?
CIA thought it was interesting.
Did they?
They actually have a little venture capital group called IntelQ.
Yes.
Actually, InQtel Clif always.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just
dyslexic on that one.
That's been one of my issues, is that I'm self-taught because I'm not a particularly good student. So schooling was an issue, but education is not, if that makes sense.
It's all right. Intel's in all our heads.
There we go. In any event, the CIA sent us back a nice little letter. I had to prepare a business plan for them, which I did.
Really?
Boy, this is interesting, but and we sure would like to look at it further, but basically what it came down to was it's a little on the left field kind of thing, and we've already funded 7 projects, and we're not even really sure how to categorize this. But it sure is interesting.
It sure is interesting, and they sure sound like they're interested. Perhaps if you can move to the next level, take it to the next level, get a little more documentation under your belts on this, you'll get more than just passing interest.
That may be. It's a very onerous and difficult process without the funding behind it. Doing this kind of thing at a two-man level is excruciating for both George and myself.
How much bandwidth are you working with now?
At the moment, I don't want to say I'm stealing bandwidth, but I'm big borrowing, and people have been very kind to run some of my programs for me. So basically, we're dealing with cable modem kind of thing.
Right.
And I should be dealing with T1s, at a bare minimum, fractional T1s.
At least.
The difference really is the number of reads we get. I'm working now with 1, maybe 2 million over the course of 3 or 4 days, and I ought to be doing 100 million a day.
Well, it's still amazing what one can do with even limited but, general broadband capability. I mean, I can understand how you're getting the results, but just try and imagine if you had computational power thousands of times greater than you've got now, as in perhaps a Cray of some sort, and unlimited bandwidth. Heaven only knows what you might come up with.
Well, you're describing what the Chinese have.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. They're, what was it, Tinghua or some such thing?
The Chinese?
The cauldron, yeah.
The Chinese, what do they have to do with it?
Well,
are they offering you bandwidth?
No, they're running a similar project apparently.
How do you know that?
Part of our program, Art, is the spiders themselves are looking for particular words.
Yeah.
And they carry around with them a lexicon, and they sort of like sweep little bits of the internet. Now,
then bid down simply, have your spiders met their spiders?
You have it.
Oh,
it was
my
an
God.
accidental handshake, and we caught some of their source code.
Oh my. Really? You caught their source code? Or some of it?
They were using a type of spider that ran on a Unix box that loads itself. It goes and reads the robot.txt file at the head of each